Lagos shimmered that evening, golden lights gliding across the skyline, laughter rising from open-air restaurants, and cars humming along the busy streets. It was a city alive with dreams, where tradition met ambition, and love still dared to bloom in unexpected places. Amara Nwosu stood at the edge of the grand ballroom. Clutching a glass of champagne she barely sipped. At 28, she carried a quiet grace, a woman of art and gentle spirit. Her world was color, canvas, and children's laughter. As an art teacher, she believed beauty could heal the world, one stroke at a time. Tonight wasn't her usual scene. The charity gala was loud and glittering, filled with politicians and entrepreneurs who spoke in polished tones. But Amara's heart was simple. She was here only because her friend Ada had dragged her along, whispering, "You need to meet someone new. Maybe love is hiding behind a glass of wine tonight." Amara smiled politely at strangers, but her mind drifted elsewhere, to her classroom, to the half-finished mural waiting for her touch. Then she saw him. Kelechi Okafor stood by the balcony, tall and composed, his black suit fitting him like a secret. His eyes carried something different. Calm, thoughtful, yet searching. He wasn't laughing like the others. He watched, as if the world unfolded before him in quiet patience. Their eyes met across the room. Just once. But it was enough. When he approached, his voice was low and warm. "You look like someone who'd rather be anywhere but here." Amara laughed, surprised by his honesty. "And you look like someone who notices too much." That was how it began. A small moment, but charged with something she couldn't name. They talked through the evening, about art, about business, about faith and family. Kelechi listened with rare attentiveness. He didn't just nod, he understood. And when he smiled, the whole room seemed to soften. By the end of the night, when he offered to walk her to her car, she felt as though she had known him longer than a few hours. Something about his silence, the way he looked at her. It felt safe. Weeks turned into months, and their lives began to intertwine. Kelechi was everything a woman could ask for. Generous, attentive, and grounded. He supported Amara's art projects, showing up at her school to help children mix paints or hang drawings on walls. He listened when she spoke about her late father, held her hand through her small insecurities, and encouraged her to dream beyond the limits of her comfort. In return, she filled his home and heart with light. Where he had once been quiet and guarded, she brought laughter and warmth. They took long walks along the beach, shared roasted corn on roadside stalls, and prayed together before meals. But there was one thing Amara noticed early on: Kelechi's habit of lighting candles at night. He would line them neatly along his windowsill, their flames flickering gently as he sat in silence, eyes closed. When she asked, he said softly, "It's how I pray. I talk to my ancestors, to thank them for life, for love, for you." It felt poetic, even sacred. She found it beautiful, the way the candlelight wrapped him in golden warmth. She didn't know then that those same candles would one day fill her heart with fear. When Kelechi proposed, it wasn't grand or staged. It was quiet and intimate. One evening after dinner, he brought her to the art studio she loved most. On the easel stood a blank canvas, with the words painted in soft strokes. "Will you be my forever?" Tears filled her eyes before she even answered. The wedding came months later, an unforgettable day. The hall was filled with music, family, and blessings. Amara wore ivory lace, her smile brighter than the chandeliers above. Kelechi looked at her as though she were the answer to a prayer. As they exchanged vows, he whispered, "You are my peace, Amara, my beginning and my end." She believed him. That night, as fireworks danced across the sky, Amara leaned against him and whispered the words that would echo in her heart for years to come. "I've found peace at last." The crowd cheered, the music soared, and in the quiet corner of the ballroom, a single candle flickered, its flame swaying as if caught between light and shadow. Their story began like a fairy tale, two hearts finding home in each other's warmth. But beneath the perfection, something else waited, something ancient, patient, and unseen. And as Amara drifted to sleep that night, resting against the man she loved, she couldn't know that soon. Her peace would turn into whispers in the dark. The first time Amara saw Kelechi's family home, she felt something she couldn't explain, a strange mix of awe and unease. It stood on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by tall palm trees and stone walls carved with patterns too old to read. The mansion was beautiful, elegant in a quiet, almost ancient way. Every brick seemed to hold a story. Every hallway whispered of people who once lived there. "This place has history," she said, stepping through the arched doorway. Kelechi smiled. "Generations of it. My grandfather built it with his own hands. He believed every home should breathe with memory." Amara nodded, though she noticed how cold the air felt, even in the afternoon sun. The chandeliers shimmered faintly, their crystals swaying though no wind blew. At night, the house came alive in another way. Shadows stretched across the long corridors, and the old clocks ticked louder than they should. Still, she told herself it was only newness, only nerves. She was married now. This was her home, too. The first week passed peacefully. They spent their evenings cooking together, teasing each other about recipes, laughing over burnt stew and too salty jollof rice. But soon, small things began to unsettle her. Kelechi was always careful about time. He'd check his watch as evening approached, his voice calm but firm. "Let's rest early tonight," he'd say, dimming the lights before midnight. He never explained why. Then one night, as she cleared the dishes, he touched her arm gently. "Amara, if you ever wake up after midnight, don't come into the study. It's my private meditation time. It helps me think clearly." His tone wasn't harsh, just oddly serious. She nodded, though a question stirred in her mind. What kind of meditation needs secrecy? She brushed it off. Everyone had their private moments, she told herself. Everyone needed space. But as she drifted off to sleep that night, she noticed his side of the bed empty, his slippers missing from the floor. The sound woke her. It was soft at first, a low hum that rose and fell like a heartbeat. She sat up, blinking into the darkness. The clock read 2:03 a.m. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she heard it again, clearer this time. A voice, not talking, but chanting, slow, steady, familiar, yet strange. She slipped quietly from the bed and padded to the door. The sound came from downstairs, a rhythmic whisper that echoed through the marble floors. Her fingers brushed the doorknob, but she hesitated. The words of his warning played in her mind. Don't come into the study. A candle's faint glow danced beneath the door at the end of the hall. She watched for a long time, heart pounding, before finally returning to bed. When she woke the next morning, Kelechi was beside her, calm and smiling. He kissed her forehead as if nothing had happened. You were restless last night, he said softly. She stared at him. I thought I heard something. Just dreams, he replied, his eyes kind. Too kind, almost rehearsed. This house has its own sounds. You'll get used to them. The following nights brought more of the same. Sometimes it was faint chanting. Other times it was the flicker of light she glimpsed under the study door. She began to imagine things, or so she thought. Once she felt a hand brush her shoulder as she stood by the window, though she was alone. Another night, she woke to find all the candles in the living room burning, their flames bending as though pulled toward something unseen. Kelechi, when asked, always smiled gently. "You worry too much," he'd say. The mind plays tricks at night. He held her hand, his touch warm, his gaze loving. Yet behind his eyes, something lingered. A secret, a shadow. Amara's days turned quiet. She still painted, but her strokes had changed. Darker colors, heavier lines. Her art felt different, as if her hands were painting what her heart refused to speak. She began to dread nightfall. Evening meals grew shorter. Conversations faded into silence. Kelechi was still tender, still gentle, but his warmth came in moments, never all at once. Sometimes he stared into nothing for long minutes, lips moving silently. Other times he'd step away mid-conversation, muttering something about time. One evening, when the clock struck 11:30, he kissed her cheek and whispered, "Sleep well, my love," before heading into the study. She tried to wait for him. Hours passed. Sleep refused to come. It happened on the 7th night. Amara couldn't bear it any longer. The sound was louder now. A deep voice weaving through the air, joined by faint echoes, as if others whispered along. She crept through the hallway, her bare feet brushing the cold marble floor. The study door stood slightly ajar. Candlelight spilled into the corridor, trembling like the breath of fire. She moved closer, her heart thudding. Through the gap, she saw Kelechi. He knelt before a circle of lit candles arranged with perfect care. Shadows danced across his face as he whispered in a language she had never heard. His eyes were closed, his hands trembling over something in the center of the circle. A small carved figure, old and darkened with age. Amara's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she couldn't move. The man she loved looked like someone else, someone ancient, someone she didn't recognize. Then, as if sensing her presence, Kelechi's head lifted slightly. His eyes opened, blank, distant, unfocused, and his voice, deeper than before, murmured a name she didn't know. Amara stumbled back, her hand flying to her chest. She turned and ran to their room, her pulse pounding in her ears. When she finally dared to look back down the hall, the study door was closed, and the chanting had stopped. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows as if nothing had happened. Kelechi greeted her with his usual warmth, setting breakfast before her, smiling as though the night had been peaceful. But when he turned away, she saw it, a faint smear of ash along his wrist, the scent of burnt wax clinging to his skin. Amara said nothing. She only smiled back. Yet, deep inside, something had shifted. The peace she once felt was gone, replaced by a quiet fear that grew stronger with every whisper in the dark. Amara woke before dawn. For the first time since her wedding, she couldn't feel Kelechi beside her. His side of the bed was cold, untouched. The smell of candle wax still hung faintly in the air. She rose and followed the scent through the hallway, stopping at the study door. It was open now. Inside, everything looked perfectly normal. Neat bookshelves, polished desk, no trace of the circle she'd seen the night before. Yet the air felt wrong, heavy, as though the room had been scrubbed of something sacred or forbidden. When Kelechi finally appeared, his eyes looked clearer, too clear, almost bright in a way that unsettled her. He smiled as though he hadn't spent the night whispering to shadows. "You should eat," he said warmly. "You look pale," Amara nodded, pretending she hadn't seen the darkness, hadn't heard the voices that called his name. But as she looked at him, she realized something had changed. His voice was the same, but the man behind it wasn't. Days passed, and their rhythm began to fracture. Kelechi, once affectionate and playful, now drifted in and out of silence. He would sit for hours staring at the window, his lips moving as though speaking to someone unseen. Sometimes, Amara would walk into a room and find him whispering to a bowl of burning herbs, his face calm, serene even, but distant, unreachable. When she tried to speak, he would smile gently, take her hand, and say, "Some prayers aren't meant to be heard, Amara." At first, she told herself he was meditating again, that this was just his spiritual discipline. But the whispers grew stronger, more insistent. And every night, she found him awake, his eyes hollow, his words a language that no human should know. One afternoon, Amara went to the village market alone. She needed air, needed to be around laughter, noise, and life again. The scent of roasted maize and spices filled her lungs, briefly calming her. An old woman selling herbs called out to her. "You're the new wife from the stone house, aren't you?" Amara nodded politely. "Yes, my husband is Kelechi." The woman's smile faltered. Her eyes darted away. "Ah, his family?" She hesitated. "They are. Keepers of the night," Amara frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman leaned closer, her voice trembling. "There are families who serve light, and others who serve what lives beneath it. Your husband's bloodline is old, too old. You should leave before the moon turns red." Amara's chest tightened. "You're mistaken. He's not—" But before she could finish, the woman crossed herself and turned away, refusing to meet her eyes again. The laughter of the market dimmed in Amara's ears. When she returned home, the house felt darker, as if it had overheard every word. That night, Kelechi surprised her with dinner. The table glowed under candlelight, their favorite dishes spread before them. Yam porridge, spicy goat meat, sweetened wine. For a moment, she felt hope. Maybe things could return to how they were. But as they ate, she noticed his hands trembling slightly. His eyes flicked to the clock. 11:37. Then 11:52. He kept smiling, but his gaze was distant, pulled toward some unseen obligation. Amara reached across the table, touching his hand. "Kelechi, please. Tell me what's happening." His smile froze. The light in his eyes dimmed. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me." Silence. Then he laughed softly, a hollow sound that didn't belong to the man she married. "You think I choose this?" he said, voice trembling. "You think I want it?" His hand tightened around his glass until it cracked, crimson wine spilling like blood across the table. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble. "Go to bed, Amara, please, for your sake." She didn't move. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a fleeting second, his eyes filled with sorrow so deep it broke her heart. Then he turned and walked toward the study. The door closed, and the chanting began again. That night, Amara couldn't resist. She crept once more toward the study, her pulse hammering in her ears. This time, she didn't just peek. She pushed the door open. Inside, Kelechi knelt in the same circle of candles. But something was different. Darker. His body trembled violently, his hands stained with ash. Symbols burned faintly across the floor, drawn in what looked like dried blood. In the center, a bowl of flame flickered, its smoke twisting into human shapes. "Kelechi!" she cried. He turned. Too fast, too sharp. His face shadowed, his voice no longer entirely his own. "You shouldn't be here." Amara froze, tears spilling down her cheeks. "What are you doing?" "It's not me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It's never been me." His body convulsed, his hands clutching his head. The air thickened with a sound. Not quite a growl, not quite a voice. Something ancient, echoing from beyond the walls. Amara stepped back, horrified. "Kelechi, please." But then his eyes opened, and for a moment they weren't human. When Amara woke, she was on the couch, the morning sun in her eyes. The study door was open. The candles were gone. The floor was clean. Kelechi stood by the window, staring at the horizon. "Was it a dream?" she whispered. He didn't turn. "Some dreams are truer than life," he said softly. When he finally looked at her, the sorrow was gone, replaced by something cold. She realized, then, that the man she married was slipping away, piece by piece, and whatever was taking his place wore his face like a mask. That night, she locked the bedroom door. For the first time since her wedding, she slept alone, or tried to, because somewhere beyond the walls, a whisper called her name. Soft, familiar, loving. But beneath it, something else answered. Morning came wrapped in silence. Amara sat at the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on the hallway. For days she had pretended not to hear the midnight voices, not to notice the fading warmth in Kelechi's smile. But something inside her had changed. Fear had become determination. There was one door she had never opened. At the end of the lower corridor, behind a heavy wooden frame etched with symbols, it waited. Kelechi had once called it my grandfather's chamber. He'd said it was sealed for respect. Now, it felt like the heart of everything wrong in the house. That afternoon, while Kelechi was away, she approached it. Dust drifted through a beam of light like falling ash. The lock was ancient, iron corroded by time. When she touched it, the metal burned faintly against her skin, as if alive. For a moment, she hesitated. But the whisper that had been haunting her nights seemed to breathe behind the door. She found a small key hidden inside Kelechi's drawer days earlier, shaped like a serpent biting its tail. It fit perfectly. The lock clicked, and the house sighed. The door opened onto darkness thick with age. A spiral staircase wound downward, swallowed by shadow. Each step creaked as if it hadn't been touched in decades. The smell of earth and smoke grew stronger. At the bottom, she found a narrow room lit by oil lamps. Carvings covered the walls. Faces, hundreds of them, each contorted in silent prayer or pain. In the center stood an altar made of stone. Upon it, the same carved figure she had seen during Kelechi's rituals, the small idol with hollow eyes and soot-blackened lips. But this time, she saw more. Beneath the altar, woven mats and old scrolls lay in careful order, each inscribed with a family name. Her husband's, his father's, his grandfather's. Each page told of a pact, generations bound to something they called the keeper of the midnight path. Her hands trembled as she read. To guard the gate between the living and the unseen, one son of each generation shall serve as vessel, until the bond is broken by love freely given and love freely returned. A chill rippled through her. Love freely given. Love freely returned. Was that what Kelechi had meant when he said, "You wouldn't understand"? When she turned, Kelechi was there. His face was half lit by the oil lamps, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. Her heart leapt to her throat. "What is this place?" He didn't answer. He walked to the altar, fingers tracing the carved idol as if it were an old friend. "This house was built over a promise," he whispered. "My bloodline guards the veil between worlds. Every generation offers one soul to keep the balance." "And that soul is you?" she breathed. He smiled sadly. "Was, until you." Amara stepped closer. "Kelechi, this isn't balance. It's slavery. You can stop it." "I can't." His voice broke. "If I resist, the shadows take everything. You, me, all that we are." Tears blurred her vision. "Then let them take me too. We'll face it together." His eyes filled with anguish. "No. The only thing stronger than the curse is love unreturned. If I let myself love you freely, the ritual will break. But the Keeper will claim us both." The realization hit her like a wave. Their love itself was the weapon and the doom. Amara reached for him, ignoring the cold air that seemed to breathe around them. Kelechi, listen to me. You've already loved me. That's why it's failing, isn't it? That's why the mask is cracking. He flinched, as if the words themselves burned. You don't understand. When the door opened, it felt you. It knows. The lamps flickered violently. The carved faces on the walls seemed to shift, their stone eyes following her. A deep hum rose from beneath the floor, ancient and hungry. Kelechi grabbed her shoulders. Go upstairs. Lock yourself in. Don't look back. No, she cried, gripping his hand. We break this together. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then the altar split with a thunderous crack. Smoke poured out, swirling like a living storm. In its depths, a shape began to form. Tall, cloaked, its voice echoing through the chamber like 1,000 whispers. The vow must be kept. One must serve. Kelechi fell to his knees, trembling. Take me, he shouted. Leave her. Amara clung to him, tears streaking her face. No, don't. The figure's shadow stretched toward her. For an instant, she felt its touch. Icy, endless, filled with sorrow. And saw flashes of every man in Kelechi's line, kneeling before the same altar. Then, with a burst of desperate strength, she shouted through the storm, I love you! Do you hear me? I love you! The chamber erupted in light. When Amara opened her eyes, she was lying on the staircase. The air was still, the lamps extinguished, the altar was gone. The carvings on the walls had crumbled into dust. Only the faint outline of the serpent key remained on the floor. Kelechi? She whispered. He stood where the altar had been, motionless. His eyes were calm now, no shadows, no tremors, but his body shimmered faintly, as if caught between worlds. You freed me, he said, voice gentle and fading. The chain's broken. Amara crawled toward him. No, please, stay. He smiled that same old smile she had fallen in love with. The keeper demanded a soul. It took the last of mine. He reached out, touching her cheek. Live, Amara. Don't let the dark make you forget the light we had. Then he was gone. Only the sound of the wind remained. Amara climbed back to the upper hall, her fingers brushing the wall for balance. The once cold house felt different now, softer, grieving. She closed the forbidden door behind her and placed the key on the table. Outside, dawn spilled across the sky, pale gold, trembling, beautiful. For the first time in weeks, the house was silent. But in the silence, she heard it. Faint, gentle, like a breath against her ear. Thank you. She smiled through her tears. The mask had cracked, and from beneath it, love had spoken its final word. The days after the ritual felt like walking through someone else's dream. Amara wandered the silent mansion, the smell of burnt wax still lingering in every hallway. The once bright rooms now felt hollow, stripped of warmth. Kelechi was alive. Barely. His body lay in the upstairs chamber, his skin pale, his breath shallow. Sometimes his eyes opened, clear for a fleeting second, and she saw the man she loved. Then the shadow would pass behind them again, thin, gray, whispering. The doctors couldn't explain it. Exhaustion, one said. Shock, another guessed. But Amara knew the truth. The keeper wasn't gone. It lingered, bound to Kelechi's blood, hungry for what had been denied. Each night, as the clock neared midnight, she felt the air thicken. The candles flickered without flame. The walls seemed to breathe. The price had not yet been paid. One morning, she noticed the first mark, a faint burn on Kelechi's chest, shaped like a spiral. By the third night, it had spread, curling up his arms, glowing faintly like embers beneath his skin. He woke screaming, clutching his chest. It's taking me, he gasped. Piece by piece, Amara held him, her tears soaking into his shirt. Then we'll stop it. We'll find a way. He shook his head weakly. There's no stopping it. The keeper always collects. But she refused to believe that. While he slept, Amara searched through the ancestral texts she had taken from the forbidden room. Most were written in a mixture of Igbo and old tongues she barely understood. But one passage stood out, half faded by time. When the vessel of the keeper weakens, love may rewrite what blood has bound, if the heart dares to trade sorrow for peace. She read the words over and over, her mind racing. Love may rewrite, but love demanded something in return. As evening fell, Amara sat beside Kelechi's bed, clutching his hand. His pulse was weak, his skin cold. You once told me love was your strength, she whispered. Let it be again. His eyes fluttered open, heavy with pain. Amara, I'm not strong anymore. Yes, you are, she insisted. You fought your whole life against something that was born in you. That takes strength, he gave a faint smile. You shouldn't have opened that door. If I hadn't, she said softly, I'd still be living a lie. He turned his head toward her. You can still leave. Let the keeper take what it wants. Don't lose yourself in this. But Amara's heart was no longer the soft, fearful thing it had been. She had seen darkness and survived it. I won't leave you to face it alone, she said. By midnight, she had made her decision. She gathered candles, the same ones Kelechi used for his rituals, and placed them in a circle on the floor. The air grew colder with every flicker. The shadows lengthened, waiting. She remembered the words she had read. Trade sorrow for peace. To save him, she would have to give something. Maybe her joy. Maybe her heart. Maybe everything. Kelechi stirred as she knelt beside him. Amara, what are you doing? Finishing what love started, she said quietly. The flames danced as she began to chant the reversed words of the keeper's vow. The same ones Kelechi had whispered for generations, but now twisted into release. From shadow to light, from binding to breath. Let love unmake what fear has kept. The air trembled. The temperature dropped until her breath turned to mist. Kelechi cried out, the marks on his skin glowing bright red. The ground beneath them pulsed like a living heart. Stop, he gasped. It will take you too. She shook her head, voice breaking but steady. Then let it take what it wants, but not you. The candles burst into blue flame. The walls rippled as if made of water. From the darkness above, a shape descended. Vast, faceless, formed of smoke and sorrow. The vow was broken, it said, its voice echoing through every room. Balance must be restored. Amara stepped forward, her heart pounding. Then take me. Take my memories, my peace. But leave him free. Kelechi struggled to rise. No, don't do this! The keeper's shadow loomed closer, its eyes like bottomless wells. Love cannot end the chain. Love must become it. Amara's tears fell, glowing as they touched the floor. Then let me be the chain that breaks, light erupted. The ground shook. Kelechi screamed as the marks lifted from his skin, flowing like smoke into the air, then into her. Pain consumed her. It was fire and ice and grief all at once. She saw flashes of every ancestor who had ever knelt before the altar, each one whispering the same plea for release. Then everything went silent. When Kelechi opened his eyes, the room was quiet. Amara lay beside him, her body still, her face peaceful. The marks were gone from him, transferred, erased. The curse had ended. He gathered her into his arms, sobbing, calling her name again and again. Why? He whispered through broken tears. Why did you take my burden? But in her stillness, there was peace. Her lips curved faintly. as if she were smiling. Through the window, dawn spilled across the sky, soft, golden, forgiving. Kelechi rose slowly, carrying her outside into the light. The mansion behind them creaked, cracked, and began to burn. Flames licking the old walls like a final cleansing. He laid her gently on the grass, the morning breeze carrying her hair across his trembling hands. "You saved me," he whispered. "You gave everything." And as the fire roared behind them, he felt something stir. A whisper in the air, soft and kind. "Love doesn't take. It frees." He closed his eyes. The curse was over, but love had left its price, written in ash, memory, and dawn. The mansion was gone, nothing but ruins and smoke beneath a silver moon. But Amara's body had not been claimed by the flames. Kelechi carried her to what remained of the garden, where wild lilies still bloomed despite the ash. He knelt there, heart pounding, breath shallow. Her skin was cool, her lips still. Yet, when he pressed his forehead against hers, he felt it. A pulse, faint but steady. "Amara," he whispered, voice breaking. "You can't leave me here. Not like this." Above them, the stars flickered strangely. One dimming, another burning brighter. The air shimmered, as if the veil between worlds thinned once more. Kelechi looked toward the horizon. Midnight was near, and somewhere deep inside him, he knew the keeper wasn't done. He gathered what little remained, half-melted candles, a broken bowl, and the old ritual cloth torn from the altar. He laid them out carefully, his trembling hands guided by instinct and memory. Amara's voice seemed to echo in his mind. "Love doesn't take. It frees." He realized now what she had done. She hadn't just taken his curse. She had given him a choice, to let her fade or bring her back through the same love that had freed them both. He struck a match. One candle flared to life, then another, until 12 flames surrounded them. Golden, alive, whispering in the wind. He closed his eyes and began to chant. Not the keeper's words, but Amara's, the reversed vow she had spoken. From shadow to light, from binding to breath, let love unmake what fear has kept. The ground trembled softly, the air thickened, the scent of lilies turning sharp and electric. Amara's chest rose once, barely. Then again, the night broke open. Shadows surged from the ruins, swirling like a storm. The keeper's voice roared, its tone both furious and mournful. "The vow is broken, yet one still remains between life and death." Kelechi stood his ground, tears streaking down his face. "You took enough. You will not take her again. Love cannot cross the veil." "Yes," he shouted, "but it can light it." He dropped to his knees, pressing his hand against her heart. "Come back, Amara. Come back to me." The candle flames turned white. The wind howled. The earth beneath them glowed as if the heavens themselves had split open. Then came her breath, a sharp, fragile gasp, like the first inhale of a newborn. Her eyes fluttered open, silver light flickering within them. "Kelechi," she whispered, weak but alive. He laughed through tears. "I'm here. You came back." But the keeper's shadow loomed again, swirling behind them, no longer furious, but solemn. Every freedom has a cost. Amara looked at Kelechi, her gaze steady. "I know." She took his hand, interlocking their fingers. "Let it take what it must. We've already given everything." The keeper's form bowed, its edges fading. "Then take peace, not penance." And with that, the shadow dissolved into starlight, scattering like dust on the wind. The candles burned down to soft embers. The first light of dawn spilled across the garden, touching everything with gold. Kelechi held Amara close, but he could already feel his strength fading. The curse may have been lifted, but the years it had stolen from his soul would not return. She saw it too, the light in his eyes dimming. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Stay with me," he smiled faintly, brushing her cheek. "I'm already free, my love." The morning wind caught the last of the candlelight, carrying it upward like small suns. He leaned close, whispering, "Live for both of us." Then his breath stilled. Amara's cry tore through the quiet air, not of despair, but of release. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her tears falling onto the circle. Each tear snuffed a candle, one by one, until only a single flame remained. She lifted it gently and stood, trembling but strong. The ruins behind her smoked, but the horizon ahead blazed with the promise of morning. As she walked away, she looked back one last time. The old mansion was gone. The chains, the whispers, the curse. In her hand, the last candle flickered softly, warm against her palm. "This time," she whispered, "the fire is for healing, not for keeping." The wind caught her words and carried them toward the lightening sky. The past was ash. Love was the flame that survived it. The village had changed. Where the great mansion once stood, now only an open field of wild lilies swayed under the sunlight. No walls, no gates, no whispers at midnight. The people no longer crossed the road in fear. Children played there now, their laughter breaking the silence that once clung like mist. And among the flowers, Amara knelt, her hands brushing over the earth. The grave bore no stone, no name, only a simple wooden charm carved with two intertwined circles, a symbol of eternity and of love that refused to be undone. She closed her eyes, whispering a quiet prayer. "You're still here. I can feel it." A soft breeze stirred the lilies in answer. In the months that followed Kelechi's passing, Amara had rebuilt her life, not by forgetting, but by understanding. She had returned to her small cottage at the edge of the forest, where she taught the children stories about the old world, stories of gods and keepers, of light that could never be caged. But sometimes, when the moon was full and the wind blew from the east, she heard faint music, the same low hum that once haunted the halls. Only now it was gentler, almost like a lullaby. One such night, she awoke to find the last ritual candle on her table, glowing softly. Its flame neither consumed nor faded. Inside it, faintly, she saw his face, smiling, peaceful. And then, his voice, carried through the flame. "You broke the circle, Amara. Now the light belongs to you." The candle flared, then stilled, the fire folding itself into a small, glowing ember. She placed it in a glass vial and wore it around her neck. From that day on, she never feared the night again. Seasons passed. One dawn, she woke to a familiar flutter. Not in the wind this time, but beneath her ribs. A heartbeat, soft and steady. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her belly. Tears welled in her eyes, both in disbelief and gratitude. "He left something behind," she whispered. "A piece of the fire." 9 months later, under the same silver moon where it all began, Amara gave birth to a son, his eyes bright and calm, his cry soft, almost melodic. When she looked at him, she saw both the beginning and the end. She named him Oluwafemi, God loves me. Years later, when her son was old enough to ask about the necklace she always wore, she told him the story. Not as tragedy, but as truth. She spoke of a man who loved deeply, who fought his own darkness, and who gave everything to break a curse born of fear. She spoke of how love, even when bound in fire and shadow, could rewrite the laws of life and death. Her son listened, wide-eyed, and asked softly, "Mama, will I ever meet him?" Amara smiled, brushing his hair. "Every time you love bravely, you already do." That night, as they slept, the wind stirred through the open window. The candle on her bedside table flickered once more, a warm, steady glow that illuminated both faces in the quiet room. Beyond the veil, in a world unseen, the keeper watched, not as a warden, but as a witness. Where there had once been chains, now only light remained, and from that light, two intertwined souls, one of fire, one of bloom, watched over the living, their love etched eternally in the rhythm of the stars, because sometimes love's truest redemption is not in the life it saves, but in the light it leaves behind.